to a brand new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm joined by two amazing co hosts, Mason Clark
Walk like a dinosaur.
and Trey McLarnon.
This is the sound of my voice.
So it's funny because the words Trey McLarnon were not a question. My question was to Mason, what?
Walk. I'm a Gen Dinosaur player for life. I've never lost at the deck. Pretty high on it. I'm pretty excited to talk about it this week.
You know what I've never lost with?
Gen Dinosaurs.
Mono Black Aggro in Standard right now.
Wow. Undefeated?
Undefeated.
How many wins?
0.
Wow. That's impressive. No losses either?
Yeah.
You are a slow player. Can't wait to see a Reddit thread about you. Well, let's move on to the show, though, probably.
Well, we want to give a special shout out to our patrons this week. We have 2 Patreon-only episodes that went up. If you haven't checked those out, which you probably haven't because they went up just before the show, but yeah, check them out. We have June's episode and July's episode. We were late on June, but we're always going to deliver on those promises. So we did 2 episodes in July. One of them named the June episode, but yeah, check those out. And thank you so much to our patrons that make those episodes possible. And shout out to Adrian for the awesome question for one of them.
Yeah, that one was a lot of fun.
Yeah. The other one was fun too, Trey.
No, that one was Mason's idea, so I can't say it was fun.
It was Hinderrocker's idea. Rest in peace.
I don't. Why do you say that?
Because Hinderrocker's not with us anymore. He's at WotC.
Yeah, I don't think you know what rest in peace
Rest in Planeswalker points, right?
Oh.
Yeah,
Well,
he
his
can't-
planeswalker points are at rest.
Exactly. He can't get any. Oh, no.
Well, let's move on to our first segment, which is hashtag always improving. Hashtag always improving is the point of the show. We want to be getting better each and every week at Magic, and Mason and I both really believe that not just Magic, but life, the things that we preach on the show and the things that we talk about, if you apply them in different areas of your life, you can improve there too. So, with that being said, Mason, since you're just a life improver, what did you do to improve at life or Magic in general?
Well, so the thing I did to improve in Magic this week is I just continued my begrudging learning of cantrips and learning how to sequence them, etc., etc. I played some Legacy this weekend. Cantrips are interesting because it's like a bunch of really small decisions that matter like a small amount, but like if you do them wrong, you're gonna lose your games, and that's especially true in Legacy. Decks like Miracles, you just like can't really afford normally to cantrip incorrectly. You have to like take a lot of time to think about that stuff. And I've just been practicing that. I've learned recently that I dislike cantripping. I do not enjoy the art and the act of casting cantrips, but it's something I'm practicing because you have to be able to do it sometimes.
Can I understand what it's? I've literally just never heard someone say this before. Like, what is the act of cantripping that you hate so much?
It's just boring. It's like, it's like really boring. It's like when I'm thinking about like all the things I could draw, all the things I'm trying to draw. I'm trying to think about my game plan, and I'm just like trying to think about like what's the optimal way to like ponder these cards. Then like I look at this ponder, and I'm like, okay, am I supposed to shuffle this or not? And then it's like, all right. And then like sleight of hand and opt are like small versions of that. Then faithless looting is kind of like, it's like all looting effects, right? Like you're just kind of like thinking about what you're trying to work towards, and with the birds, it's a bunch of little really tedious small decisions that like matter a lot but aren't fun or rewarding. They're just like choices I have to make. And like brainstorming, I also find to be like, while hard and challenging, it's like once again very tedious. I just like don't enjoy brainstorming at all. I also think I'm like, for someone that hasn't brainstormed, I'm definitely not good at brainstorming because like it takes like a lot to get good at brainstorming. But for someone that doesn't brainstorm, I think I'm pretty okay at it. That's my sick brag of the week.
What?
Brainstorming is so boring. You're like so a lot of the times you like brainstorm. You're like, what are the 2 worst cards in my hand I don't want anymore? Let me put them there and play this fetch land and crack it, and or crack the fetch land and play. And then when you don't have that, you like look at your cards. You're like, all right, how am I going to shuffle these away, and or what is the order in which I want to draw them? And then Miracles adds another level of boringness to it, where it's like, okay, do I want to set up this Terminus or not? And then it's like, look at the board. If the board's scary, set up Terminus for next turn. If not, set up Terminus for the other turn.
Hello,
So boring.
everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm joined by my co-host, Trey McLarnon. And this week, we're talking about why brainstorming is one of the most fun things you can do in Magic. Hello, Trey. How are you doing this week?
I knew where this joke was going before it started.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everything Mason is saying is astonishing, and then also not from knowing him for as long as I have, which is that like he likes solving complicated puzzles in Magic, but like he likes it when that puzzle wins the game, and that like brainstorming and
But
cantripping in a
brainstorming
sequence.
does that. You
I
win the
know,
game.
like
Yes,
not right
brainstorm.
then. Like if he solves like an Amulet Titan puzzle, he wins right then. If he solves a KCI puzzle, he wins right then. If he solves a brainstorm puzzle, he has to cast another brainstorm later. Like it's not over. But it is complex, the decisions that you're having to make, but you're not like winning right then.
Yeah, but also if you mess up those decisions, you like get punished and you don't
Oh,
get to win.
Can I
So
ask how you feel
I
about
so
casting? Like, how do you feel about casting Ancestral Recall?
oh, I like that. That's very. That's like
So
I'm not a
the
psycho.
so the fact is that this tells me that you might need to work a little bit more on your brainstorming.
No, I
Because
told you a
it's
second
like
ago. I pushed away the bad cards. I got that part down. Like, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. The part that is tedious to me is like making sure I'm doing it correctly. When I cast Ancestral, I just get the 3 cards, and then I continue my game plan from there. When I cast Brainstorm, I have to now think about what makes this Ancestral. Like, I'm aware the card is Ancestral with the I'm in. I get it. I get it strong, and I get that like cantripping is powerful, blah 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 blah. I understand. I understood it. Like I played Arclight Phoenix for the first time ever, and I was just like, oh yep, this is everything I thought. Like your deck always plays Magic. This is really strong, but to like do this thing that's like not rewarding. It also like just doesn't affect the battlefield a lot of the time. I'm like making all these choices that only matter for me. Like in the moment, even though they will affect my opponent, my opponent just doesn't interact. I'm like sitting over here pondering. I'm like playing against Trey, and I'm spending 45 seconds trying to figure out how to beat a high tide deck.
Can I
It's
ask
just
you a question?
shoot.
How many Hymn to Turok were cast before you brainstormed?
I've had him cast on me in the past, not recently.
Well, I mean, like when you were casted, like have you cast brainstorm with him on the stack?
Oh yeah, I've played Death Shadow Mirrors and stuff. Yeah,
I just don't. I don't think we see eye to eye here, man.
I don't even get me started on how I think Serum Visions is totally acceptable.
We also we obviously also don't seem eye to eye because, as he said, I was playing High Tide, which is doing nothing other than casting cantrips and sitting over there doing whatever I want while not worrying about the battlefield.
It was so boring. We did nothing the whole match. We played twice at this Legacy event we played at. One time, Trey goes, "Your deck never pressures me." I played a turn 3 Mentor and he died, and I called him out on it. And then the next game, like I drew, like he played this thing, the Time Twister or whatever, and I drew Forceful Surgical and beat him because of it. And I was like, "Wow, what a fun game we played!" And then the next time we played, I played a Narsa and he scooped. He just picked his cards up against me.
To be fair, yeah, can't be.
I did have a Jason play too, and like 5 cards in hand at the time. It's not like he was, unreasonably
One time-
scooping, but
I want to tell only the beginning of a story.
I love
drunk
that.
I was drunk at a Denny's, and I was playing
feels like
High
the
Tide.
middle of the story.
No, I was drunk at a Denny's playing High Tide, and I was apparently really loud.
I can
I believe everything about this story. I guarantee this is a true story.
It
Yeah.
is.
So speaking of true stories, what is your always improving moment of this week?
Yeah, I was not drunk at a Denny's playing High Tide this week. However,
That was last week.
Hopefully, several always improving moments since that have prevented you from being drunk
Yeah.
at a Denny's playing High Tide.
but this week was really interesting for me as far as Magic goes, in a couple of ways. Kind of just looking at the decks that I want to play for Denver, looking at the decks that people are getting mythic with, listening to a ton of Magic podcasts, and just trying to consume as much as I can. This is going to be my first Grand Prix in over a year. Hashtag Dad Life has been pretty intense, and then my job in the last year has also just gotten substantially more intense. Today I got some very big news at work too, which I hope to share on the podcast soon. But kind of finding ways to maximize my time in Magic is something that I have to do before Magic events. So I made a post in the Constructor Critics group about having to prepare for 3 formats right now. So I played a sealed 1K, and my biggest always improving moment is learning that Bone Splinters is a sorcery, because that's how that card works. But I would say outside of that, kind of just learning the ins and outs of a new standard format that has a lot of really high impact cards. If you think about Sorin, if you think about Risen Reef, if you think about, I think most of the Cavaliers are playable, and only some of them are seeing play. If you think about all the things going into this new format, how it's shaping up with some decks that people might not have expected. kind of getting back into the groove of playing X number of hours of Magic in a week to prepare for an event is just something that I haven't had to do for a little while. Because when I'm testing for PTQs, I'm kind of just doing it passively because there's an entire season. But when you're testing for something like a Grand Prix, I find that you kind of have to consolidate that and have more defined testing. And so, kind of in chats with a couple different people, including Casey Bloodworth, former host of the show, that I'm going to the Grand Prix with, and we've talked about kind of just various different ramp decks. I think is kind of both where we kind of like things, whether it's Teamer Flood, whether it's Bant Ramp, whether it's Simic Nexus, whether it's just Teamer Elemental Ramp that doesn't have Flood. All of those decks are kind of where we're talking about, and I'm learning a lot of different things with this format. Kind of reminds me of Lorwyn Standard, with so many triggers going on.
Go on.
and I really like that, and it gives you a lot of opportunities to learn and gain edges in the format. Kind of like one of the better things that we could talk about is that Risen Reef, for example, when the trigger happens, even if it's a land, you can put that land into your hand and play it untapped if you don't have a land drop for the turn. And that's just a play that a lot of people apparently haven't noticed that they can do, and something to definitely think about. So kind of just learning the format in different ways like that. I mean, even on stream, I think I mentioned this last week. Like, I didn't realize that Lotus, the Locust dude, the Omnath, could actually just ping everything, and just kind of learning those things, and cards not working exactly how you have them in your head, kind of stuff, is really important. Also, called shot. I said Locust Omnath would be in my top 5 cards ever by the end of its time in Standard. I have zero doubts that will be true at this point.
Go ahead and lock it in.
I feel like you have so much control over this called shot. You know what? I'm gonna take the bet. How much? Can I mention about Risen Reef real quick? That's like another thing about cantripping that's so boring. It's like, do I put the land in play? What do I put it in my hand? It's just another cantripping example.
Anyway, so I would say that my real always improving moment is just dedicated practice and getting used to that again.
Word. Yeah, I mean, that is something that is like an important part of playing Magic. And I think like playing the bigger events, kind of like you talked about, and it's something that is like, it's very time consuming. Takes up like a lot of your energy and a lot of your day if you're like really doing it, and it can be hard with a family. And it's hard to also get back in that groove when you haven't done it in a while. You mentioned it's been like basically a year since your last GP that you cared about, right? So it's like it's hard to.
That I cared about might have been longer than that. It's just the years since the last one I played in.
My bad. Sorry, yes, this is the last one you played in. So yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing, Like I'm even having trouble like finding the time to like dedicate to the SCG I'm going to in 2 weeks. I just found out about. So it's like it's a hard thing to do. So.
Yeah. What about you, Mason? What did you do to him? Oh wait, no, you already went.
So this is like casting a cantrip. It's very repetitive. It's not very entertaining for other people. So I'm gonna pass it on to Trey.
I'm just I'm mad at Mason right now. Just mad at him.
Is your always improving moment not hanging up the period when I said that?
Yeah, I contemplated quitting the podcast in the middle of Mason talking. No, mine, seriously, this is a thing that I've had that I've noticed has been an issue in my game for a while, which is that I have a very difficult time with crosstalk. So if I am playing a match and there are 2 people that are talking across the match or like behind the table, across the table or something like that, there's a conversation that's going on in some way that's like crosstalk during the match. It's something that really irritates me, like bothers me a lot. And while I'm generally very good at controlling my emotions during an event, I don't tilt, I don't do any of those other kinds of things. That's something that it really frustrates me and I get really upset about it. And it has easily cost me like event finishes.
I had a PPTQ top 8 that cost me, where I like the players were being loud and I couldn't hear my opponent, but like rather than say something, I just got upset and lost the match. So I've definitely been there.
I mean, I've definitely gotten loud in a store because it was going on. But it's a thing that it's been something that bothers me, and it's been something that I've had to work on for a while. And so one of the things that I've been doing this week is listening to conversational podcasts that have multiple hosts while I'm playing Arena. Like normally when I would play Arena, I listen to music or, do something like that I find soothing and relaxing. And instead I've been listening to like podcasts that have like 3 or more people talking at once, talking to each other about something that I'm trying to listen to, like while I'm playing, and it's so frustrating to me. It's so irritating, but it's something that I'm trying to do because I have to try to figure out a way to work past that in a way that's like constructive.
I love it.
Since you like movies, you should check out friends of our podcast, Nerd On, as a podcast. They review movies and stuff like that on their show, and there's like 5 of them that are talking to each other. So
This is like when Goku has on the weighted like gi, and he's like super heavy, and he takes it off, and he can like jump to the clouds and stuff. That's gonna be Trey at SCG Columbus. Someone's gonna be having a little cross talk. Like, are you that guy from CC? And he's like, what was that? I'm holding 3 conversations right now while I play my complicated combo deck. Oh, look at me.
that's a special shout out to all of the Dragon Ball Z fans out there.
Yep. That's a Dragon Ball reference. That was when I went old school with you.
Yeah,
That's fair.
Yeah.
But
I don't know
that's
how
the
I
thing
knew
I'm
that,
trying
but it's true.
I'm trying to
So-
do.
So, is it working? Like, did you have that come up during the week at all, or during the weekend at all?
It didn't really come up during the weekend at all. But you know, it's just a thing that I'm trying to use that time to work on a skill that I know that I need to work on, as opposed to just jamming tunes because it's fun. Like, you know, I'm trying to actually like focus on a thing that I know is a problem, and I know that has been something that's cost me like edge points at a time when I didn't need it to cost me edge points.
I wonder if I should try this because I have found that I started listening to my stream music when I'm not streaming because I got so used to doing that when playing Arena that I wonder if I should switch that up and when I'm not streaming do what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big difference. You know, and it's weird, but it's like it's a thing that we talk about here a lot, right? It's like finding ways to maximize your testing time and like what are you testing? And so one of the things that I'm testing is not necessarily a specific matchup, but I'm like literally trying to test that skill.
Well, when they changed the electronic device rule so that I couldn't listen to music anymore, it actually had a really negative impact on my results. I actually missed day 2 of a couple Grand Prix and didn't hop into a couple of PTQs right after that. Like, I actually had a really hard time adjusting.
Yeah.
You used to be able to listen to music while you played?
You
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
What?
Mason's like,
No, it was dope.
it was so much better. I would have one ear pod in, so I would listen to music, and then like, it's actually not good for your brain for what it's worth. You actually probably shouldn't do it. But I'm like Trey, for me, I'm the same way, man. Like when there are people going off, like the number of times that I've called a judge just from a side conversation, like is probably too many. Like it means I'm not paying attention to my match.
Yeah, the time that I got loud that I was talking about was actually a judge in the room took a FaceTime call and sat at the table next to us, like screaming.
It was
into a
me versus
FaceTime
Trey in the
call.
finals. That's why I was laughing earlier when he said it
And
too,
I
because I
was-
knew exactly what he was talking about.
I was furious.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what? You're probably not furious about it though, Trey. It's our sponsor at Oasis Games.
You know, you're right. Hello, fellow Magic competitor. I know that this segment of the show has come with certain expectations. This is the time that you expect me to talk about something very weird and unexpected with an unnecessarily flowery language where I flawlessly say ridiculous tongue twisters like Meredith meandered through the marigolds before meeting her match near the matriculating stream. Or you expect me to go ahead and dagger our co-hosts like Mason or Spencer for borrowing too many cards or clinking drinks on the sound or something else like that. But and then my reaction is exaggerated and completely inappropriate to whatever the minor infraction was. Or you expect me to get fired up and old man yell at the latest hunt on Reddit. And you might be asking yourself, which hunt? And I am talking about the witch hunt. That's exactly the hunt that I'm talking about. It seems like it's constantly the only hunt that the anonymous hordes of the internet are concerned with these days. I mean, sure, cheating is a serious problem and we have to stay vigilant, but calling for heads every time you watch coverage of an event just because you don't know how the cards work just isn't reasonable. And it isn't healthy for you, the game, or anyone. Unfortunately, my dear fellow Magic competitors, I failed you this week because I've been spending too much time playing Magic and Teamfight Tactics to write this week's ad. And I have to sincerely apologize to you and to the good folks at Oasis Games. But despite my blunders, the deals are still there for you. So head over to mtgoasis.com and use code CCMTG for 15% off your first order. And you can use the code WouldThatBeGood for 4% off every order.
Trey, can I just thank you for not only always improving, we're talking about like trying to crosstalk, but also in the ad, being willing to admit that, you just didn't have time, you couldn't do it, and you just had to like kind of say stuff from the heart. So
Yeah.
thank you for being accepting. Not a lot of people on Magic are willing to accept when they're wrong, and you were willing to accept like, hey, I didn't put the time into this. I should have. You clearly winged it there. So thank you for being honest about that.
It's really tough to admit that to the listeners, but you have high expectations of this segment, and I promise to try to bring it in the future.
And while the bus is heavy, Trey, I think that my drink can get me through it.
There's utter silence so that everyone at home could hear the ice. And I know that I didn't talk, so that could be heard.
So fun fact, I actually like the sound of the ice.
You like the sound of the ice?
Yeah, like when other people have podcasts that they're drinking cocktails on, I like it reminds me of drinking a cocktail, and I really like it. So like, I don't even care that it doesn't get it. Like, people have messaged me about it before. They're like, "Dude, we can hear your drink on the podcast." I'm like, "I know, isn't it great?"
All right, tweet at the podcast. Tweet at CCMTG. And if you think that is crazier than me disliking cantrips, put I agree. So let us know.
We know what the poll is going to be after this episode goes up.
Oh my goodness.
No, I completely agree, Trey. It's I tried to make a silent joke about the not understanding Risen Reef, but you really went in there, man. Anyway, let's talk about Risen Reef. Eventually, let's talk about the new decks in Standard, because I actually think this is the biggest shakeup I've seen from a core set ever. Maybe that's not true. Maybe even the Titans in like the Titans in the Jun / Mythic Bant format, like Balakut became a real like a tier 1 deck instead of a tier 0.5 deck, or tier 2.5 deck. But other than that, like, I actually can't remember an impact this big from a core set. Can you, Trey?
No. And
Origins.
that season haunts my dreams still.
What happened during that season?
I lost to Valakut in winning in for PTQs like every single time.
Yeah, that deck was sweet. It wasn't even the best Valakut deck. The next Valakut deck was way better.
Oh, it hurt me.
But yeah, I think that we have new cards in basically every archetype. So the way that the power rankings break down for those who might be new to this segment is you get 6 points for you get points for finishes, and the finishes are loosely tied to about the record it takes to get that finish, with bonus points for people who do well in the top 8. So you get 6 points for first, 5 points for second. You get 4 points for a top 4, 3 points for a top 8, 2 points for a top 32, and 1 point for a top 64. Which we do have top 64 points this week, so we have quite a few points to be given out. We use the SCG Classic, the SCG Open, and the Standard Mocks as the starting points for these as the points for these power rankings. So with that being said, before we get into the power rankings, I'm actually curious: did these power rankings surprise you two?
I was surprised by the first place contender in the power rankings by quite a bit.
So was I. We can get into that when we get into the first place deck.
Yeah, I am surprised. Half of 5 and 6 is on here. I'm surprised 8 is as low as it is, and I'm surprised that one of them didn't make the list.
Yeah,
say it like that.
I can agree with those things.
After playing with Gen Dinos, I think it might be the best deck in Standard because I never lost with it. But
so was Mono Blue the one that you were surprised didn't make it?
Yeah, I think Mono Blue is really good. Right, at least like this last weekend, I think it was really good. And I don't know if that enough people just didn't get the message. If it was too honestly hard for a lot of people. I know it seemed like Ross was having to really go in the tank on a lot of plays if you watch coverage. So I don't know if that was a factor. Or maybe just pairings, etc. But I'm surprised Mono Blue did not make the top of the list. So sorry, got stuck in my throat there.
You're all good. So to be fair, Mono Blue was 1 point from making this list.
Okay. Well, yeah. I think Mono Blue. By the way, if you're out there and you're thinking I really wish I could play my little blue creatures with Curious Obsession, I think now is a pretty good time. Teferi is kind of at an all-time low since it came out, Teferi 3. And I think that deck is quite good when that card is not around. So
yeah. We'll just mention the honorable mentions. It is Mono Blue and Bant Ramp as the two decks that just fell short by 1 point, with 8th place actually going to Boros Feather, which, Mason, you said you were surprised at how low it was.
Yeah, I think that deck was in my mind, the kind of the top decks were Teamer Elemental decks or Teamer Mental decks, Boros Feather and Mono Blue, with probably being blue, and then Teamer and Feather being tied. So I was surprised to see it so low. I did see a lot of players who I know on the tour who are like quite good players playing the deck. So I don't know like if they had bad matchups or people were prepared for Feather, etc., or maybe they were having a harder time playing Feather. I know that Feather doesn't play out like an intuitive deck. Like you don't actually want to jam your Feather on 3. You kind of want to play it on 4 with protection a lot of the time. Just little things like that. So I'm curious if it's more of like the deck's really hard or if people were gunning for it. It's kind of hard to know exactly. But I think the deck was really powerful. I mean, Tamaiko got his 3rd back-to-back-to-back single open top 8, which is honestly insane. But he top 8 with the deck, and I think the deck's quite strong. It's one of the decks that people have been asking. I've got some messages like, what should I play in Standard coming up? And it's one of the top decks I recommend. It's really good.
I mean, that deck was really strong like before the set came out, and like we talked about it during the set review, but like getting God's Willing is like huge for that deck. Like that's such a good card for that deck.
Yeah, getting God's Willing, getting the Scry Temple, and I really like Tamaiko's innovation. Well, more of like I guess adopting something that some people had done with putting War Boss in the main deck, because it just gives you a creature that puts a lot of creatures on board for your pump spells and also can take over the game for you. So.
Well, it's also a thing that lets you like sandbag pump spells, right? Like you don't have to like put a lot of stuff in order to pressure them.
Yep.
So I have been playing this deck because I'm recording an episode of Arena Mythic Cast about this deck tomorrow. So I've played this version. I played the version that my guest will be talking about that he got Mythic with, and I've also played a version that I'm now playing because as I'm trying to test for the GP. I actually mostly disagree with Legion War Boss in the main. I think the card is kind of worse than other things that you could be doing. Like if I wanted to, like, I actually think Gideon, for example, is just substantially better in this slot and does the same thing, presenting a very large clock and something that lets you present a threat without having to commit to using your spells. Legion War Boss has actually been pretty underwhelming for me.
Oh, interesting. I haven't actually played with the War Boss's main deck before. I played Feather at the Invitational a couple months ago, back when Teferi 3 was in the format, so I have a little bit of experience with the deck. But having War Boss main deck, contextually, sometimes it is going to be a lot worse, right? Because like when I played with it, it was coming in the matchups I really wanted it. So that's interesting. What matchups have you found you didn't like it in? Just like
I actually don't have War Boss in my 75 right now. I have Tajik in the slot that the 2 War Bosses would have taken up.
Okay. Have you tried playing with Burning Prophet?
That sounds really bad. That's what this deck was playing before.
Okay.
I have Tikali Honor Guard main.
Okay.
So I have 2 Honor Guards main, 2 Honor Guards on the board, and 3 Adonto Vanguards main right now.
Sure, that's fair. You had to play 4 Honor Guards on the board before so you could make room. I was quite impressed with Burning Prophet, but the deck was different back then. It plays out differently, so.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that Burning Prophet solves for a problem that God's Willing now solves for, and the Temples now solve for, in the fact that you like actually don't have any form of card draw in the deck, so you need deck filtering, and Burning Prophet did a good job of doing that. But now that you don't need that anymore as much because you have these amazing tools, I think that Burning Prophet goes down quite a bit.
That's reasonable.
Have you had any issues with the Gideon as far as casting it on 3?
No, I mean most of the decks are pretty plains heavy, so you don't really have that issue. So I think Oliver Tamaiko's list, I can pull it up. Yeah, it even plays 7 plains in the main, so only playing the 3 mountains.
Okay.
To be fair though, sometimes this deck just has a problem casting 3 drops with only 22 lands on time for what it's worth.
Yeah, that was something that I had experienced, but I think that's fine. I think you can function off 2 lands for a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing that I've noticed about this deck is the number of times you just use Defiant Strike as a free draw to actually have a good late game. Where you just are like cast just Defiant Strike just to cast it when my opponent is tapped out. When you have a Feather in play is like pretty high.
Oh yeah, do it all the time.
Literally 100% of the time that you have it.
Yeah. You just never not do it. Yeah.
Which is not an intuitive play when you look at the deck, right? You think of this as like a pump spell that gives you keeper, kind of like our heroic deck, but actually with Feather, it's just free card draw. It's like Whisper of the Muse in white.
That's cantripping I can get behind.
Whisper of the Muse?
No, Defiant Strike.
That's like Whisper of the Muse is in like my top 10 favorite cards of all time.
Right up there with Omnath.
Yeah. One thing that I will say, so have either of you played this deck at all?
Not the new version. So.
Okay. Grid for Battle is one that I also haven't been super impressed with. I only have one in my list right now. I think in Oliver's deck tech, he said that he liked it a bit more because of Legion War Boss, if I'm not mistaken, which makes a lot of sense. And that was interesting to see him playing two with Legion War Boss.
Yeah, when I played the deck, we didn't have God's Willing, so we had 4 Gird for battles, and that was just it was quite good there, but the deck was more beat downy oriented. That card really pushes through a lot of damage. I really like having it as a one of.
It's way better than Grid for Battle, which is what I said.
Yes, I got confused. One
of them's a card.
Yeah, and the other one's Grid for Battle, which is the name of the card, and Mason was right.
Okay, I was confused. I was like, is there a card called Grid for Battle? Because I'm going to give big slops to Watsy for putting those two in the same format.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
You know what? I just made a mistake.
No, you're good. I didn't even catch it. I just kind of autocorrected in my head, I think. But yeah, I think Grid for Battle is like a really nice card to have like as a one of. There were a lot of really great draws with the deck where you like played an Arcanist on 2, you played a Battlewise on 10th District Legionnaire on 3, you cast your Gird, you Dreadhorde Arcanist it back, and you hit them for a bunch of damage. So
I like that you just default call it Battlewise Hoplite. You're like, yeah, this is the heroic deck, whatever. This is the way that it goes.
I call it that all. I would say I said that at the invitation. I was like, I'll cast Battlewise Hoplite. And my opponent was like, what? I'm like, this thing. Sorry, same card. you know.
Yeah. So one thing that I really liked about Dreadhorde Arcanist before that I've played that doesn't seem to be the case in Oliver's list is just playing a different style of 1-drops out of the board to get value out of it. It looks like he did not go that route. Is that something you've done, Mason?
I had Demystify and stuff. I didn't go too deep on it. If I remember correctly, I just had Demystify, extra Sheltering Light, and I believe an extra 1-mana pump spell of some kind. But I can't remember exactly which one it was. I believe it was a protection type one. But either way, it's something that I think you can do, and it might be something that I need to look closer at M20. It is interesting. One thing that's really cool about Arcanist, though, is when you work with it with Feather to get them back late game. So I try to put a lot more spells that do that. But I also don't know if Demystify is actually great in the deck or not. Because I feel like we just kill the decks we try to Demystify a lot. So
Yeah, I think that one of the downfalls for this deck this week, if you listen to Hardcast, shout out to those guys, friends of the podcast.
Co-host won the Open?
Yeah, co-host won the Open. I was just going to say, actually, now that we're talking about that. But one of the things that they talked about was Boros Feather versus Nexus on this week's show. And I think that they really nailed it in that conversation, talking about why this deck has a bad Nexus matchup. And, why you might not understand that on paper, but you just actually don't have that fast of a clock in this deck. And
Yeah, your deck's more resilient than fast.
Right, yeah. You're like a resilient aggro deck that can, exactly. And I think that hurt this deck because there were so many Nexus decks that did well that went into day 2.
That makes sense. What do you all think about the Naya versions of this deck, specifically the ones that play the green enchantment?
I think it's bad.
Yeah, I think you're just making your mana worse, and for not enough of a payoff.
Okay, that's kind of where I was at. I just didn't see it.
I think that's exactly. Somebody actually texted me about that this week. They said, "Hey, what do you think about the Naya version playing?" It's called Seasons of Growth.
I believe so.
Yeah, and I think that while your deck is just already good at doing that, like it's already good at going through its deck now between Defiant Strike, God's Willing to Scry, Temple of Triumph. Like you already do see enough cards. I don't think it shores up any weaknesses.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like that card does give you a lot of value, but you're already a value deck, right? Like once you have like a Feather and a God's Willing and like a Defiant Strike, like you don't need anything else, right? Like, and so yes, this can churn through a lot of your deck. This does a lot of things, but you also have to take like a turn off most of the time to set it up. So it just makes you slower and grindier, but you're already like pretty good at being grindy.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts, Nathan?
Oh, I agree with everything that was said. I have nothing to add. I think it makes your mana worse. If there was the green temple, I might consider it. The green-white one.
Let's talk about the 7th place deck. This deck is unbeatable in the hands of Mason Clark. We have Jund Dinosaurs.
Yeah, I just put Galta in play on turn 4 like every time with haste. Do y'all not do that? So the cool thing about this deck, I will say this, is that Jund Dinosaurs, when looked at it, has 8 mana cheaters with 4 Marauding Raptor, 4 Opatech Huntmaster, and I think that's really powerful when your bodies are this large. Like Rotting Regisaur, Regisaur Alpha, Galta. Those are some huge dinosaurs that can really get in there and really apply a lot of pressure very quickly.
So you've played with this deck, and I understand the appeal of Odebek Huntmaster. When I did the streamer event, I was playing dinos, and I was playing the green one that becomes a 3/3 if you have a dino in play. And the reason that I did that is because it survives Marauding Raptor, and Odebek Huntmaster does not. So, in your undefeated experience with this deck, Mason, why don't you talk about that for me?
Haste is fast. I think that's basically like the reasoning. I have not played with the other card. The other card surviving Marauding Raptor makes a lot of sense. I would say this card's probably higher upside than that card. I think giving your Regisaur, the Regisaur Alpha itself haste, giving your Galta haste, or giving your Rotting Regisaur haste are all very powerful plays. By the way, I do not like that the Rotting Regisaur is not Regisaur Alpha, but in zombie form. I think that's a flavor fail, and I don't approve of it.
Is it not?
I don't think so. That one kind of looks like its head looks different to me. I could be mistaken. I'm not, a dinosaurologist.
You're not a zombie expert.
I'm not a zombie expert or that. I'm more of a, a cantrip hating expert. But either way, I think the haste is pretty important. I haven't played enough to have any definitive proof or anything like that. But in my games, I was like, oh, this is so great. Like I go turn 2 this, and then turn 3 I attack with a 7/6. It's like so much pressure on my opponents. And then if I have Marauding Raptor, it's like, oh, I play this and I attack for 4. That's still like a lot of pressure on my opponents. So
a Gruul version of this deck did get points this weekend. It's not included in these points. What do you guys think about playing more of a less super aggro plan and more of a mid-range plan to just play straight Gruul with things like Domri?
I think that the aggro plan is better. I think that, trying to play like the slower mid-range versions of these decks hasn't worked up until this point. And I think having the bigger beef and the faster clock with getting this stuff going and getting it out is the thing that puts this in contention and being on the map of being able to do stuff with it.
Well, there was a time, I don't remember if it was a year ago or a year and a half ago, right after it was either a banning or a rotation, where Gruul Dinos with Chandra, the 4-mana Chandra, was the best deck for a good 3 weeks on MTGO. So it's not like it's not possible to make those decks work. Obviously, 4-mana Chandra is better than most cards in Standard right now, but...
Yeah, but then you get into the question when you're playing the straight Gruul, especially with the tools that are there, and especially with you played a lot of Gruul mid-range in the last Standard. Like, at the points on your curve when you're playing just the Dinos, like, what are you getting for playing the Dinos versus playing just the other Gruul cards?
Yeah.
Like, Rekindling Phoenix and Hellkites and all of that stuff.
Yeah, to be fair, the versions that were mid-range Dino decks before did play Rekindling Phoenix. So it was Rekindling
Smart.
Phoenix and Chandra were the 4 drops. I think a couple things. So I think Rekindling Phoenix has mostly fallen out of favor due to Teferi. And so if you can make your Richar Raptor and stuff have an ETB effect with your Marauding Raptor. Also, similar to Mason's complaint, I don't like that there's 2 Raptors and 2 Regisaurs. It's just very confusing. I guess
Slops.
I guess that's what you get when you have themes. But I don't know. It's just a deck that I'm considering to put some time into testing. I think that the upside of getting to play Galta Primal Hunger in a deck that plays red removal, it lets you win that mid-range war that some of the Gruul decks have to fight over. While not like, I don't know. I just find Nullhawd Ferox to be like a very blunt weapon that just doesn't work most of the time, and being able to play Galta in a deck that doesn't play that card is really appealing to me.
So I would say here is kind of my thing I don't really love about the Gruul Dinosaur deck is not so much that like the Gruul Dinosaurs can't be a deck or whatever. I don't agree with Trey on that statement. I think it's totally possible now because the cards are different and things are different. By the way, the one I played did not play any Nullhide Ferox in the main deck. I had a Shifting Ceratops, but
No. I was saying they both do that. I'm saying that the appeal of Dinos to me is playing Regisaur Alpha and stuff.
Oh, you mean over traditional Gruul?
Yeah,
My
go
bad,
for
I'm so sorry.
traditional gruel, which was in response to Trey's question.
Gotcha. Sorry, my bad. I got confused there for a second. But with the Gruul Dinosaur deck, the main problem I kind of have with it is it plays kind of this more mid-rangey plan, and I'm not so sure if that can actually grind with like Teamer Elementals, with like honestly, I don't know if it can keep up with Vampires, Esper Hero, any of those decks as well. Warboros Feather as things, and then I think you slow yourself down for Simic Nexus. So I think you're hurting yourself in a lot of ways. I think you can beat those things when you draw your trample dinosaurs, like your Galtas. But when you don't draw those, you have a really hard time. The opponent can clog up the ground, outgrind you with value, and then go over the top. And while you can sneak through damage and you can charging monster sword and you can like push through some, I think it's unlikely to be an effective strategy going into the next weekend, where everything stands at the moment. Not to say that it won't be a thing throughout the format. I just think there are too many things that are good against mid-range decks, and I'd rather have the Gen Dinosaur deck, which can just play big creatures and get them in quickly and try and, for lack of a better word, cheese your opponent. Like, I'm going to put you to a test. I'm going to put a huge overcosted creature into play very quickly, and if you cannot beat that, it is going to snowball me some advantage. So,
Yeah, and with the Jund one as well, you get access to like some pretty powerful sideboard cards because you can play things like Duress and Noxious Grasp and things that are real benefits.
Dude, duress out of the deck is something that's made me consider like maybe I should look at Jund. I still like I am considering just playing Jund and making it a more mid-range deck rather than an aggressive deck, just because I think that it's so hard with the Black Dino though. Like you kind of have to be aggressive. So
yeah, the Black Dino asks you to be aggressive. Like, you have to have card advantage in non-traditional ways with Black Dino. So,
Yeah. But it also just lets you be aggressive. It doesn't just make you be aggressive. Like it lets you be aggressive.
sure, that's fair.
So, all right, I think that we've covered dinos pretty well. Let's move on to our next deck. That is, this deck is tied, and we're gonna do the one that I think Mason is surprised about first. But let's talk about the best Sinister Sabotage deck in Standard right now. Jeskai Control. No, just kidding. We have Simic Flash.
And I
So
think this was a Austin Collins brew, wasn't it?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So talk to me about this, Mason.
I want Trey to talk about it. Trey likes this deck way more than I do.
I don't even know that that's true. I mean, this was a thing that during the set review I thought was going to be a possibility. Like, I think that this is something that, you know, Nightpack Ambusher is basically a thing that lets this happen, along with Brineborn Cutthroat. Like, these are the things that, like, make this deck work, right? Nightpack Ambusher coming in and giving you a big body that also, like, if you leave up Frilled Mystic mana, it's like, is it going to be Ambusher? Is it going to be Frilled Mystic? What's going on? And then once you have Ambusher down, if they can't deal with it, like, you just get 3/3s every turn for the rest of the game. And you just get to sit there on your counter spells while you make all these wolves, and it's certainly a problem. But, like, it's really weird that, like, it seems like the only reason that this deck can exist is because the Teamer Elemental decks have made Teferi 3 like go down in the amount that it's seeing play, and so then this is causing this deck to be able to show up, because I don't know how this deck would ever beat a Teferi if it existed.
Well, even the Esper Hero deck that top 8'd, it only plays 3 Teferi Time Reveler. Like,
Yeah.
not only is it down in the number of Esper decks being played, but also they have to adjust and they're playing less Teferi.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, I think that this deck is interesting. I also like the sideboard package of 4 Growth Chamber Guardians, 4 Shifting Ceratops. Just like to get in there, you know, if somebody's really coming hard about your flash plan, like, just we just got a bunch of like big value stuff.
Yeah, I'm interested that this deck does not play the Ether card, just because.
Aether Gust? Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm surprised by a couple of things. I'm looking at the 13th place list by Brandon Dempsey, and I don't know. This list does not look like the list that I saw going around on social media before the SCG, which makes me think that either Brandon or somebody else has gone around tuning this, and they came to some very interesting decisions.
Yeah, for sure. To be fair, the 16th plate list from Joshua Satterfield does play 3 Aether Gusts, and doesn't play the Growth Chamber Guardians.
Yeah. Mason, tell me about your thoughts on the deck.
So, like, I think Nightpack Ambusher and Frilled Mystic are very strong. You know, I think we've talked about Frilled Mystic a lot since we joined CC, probably more than maybe it deserved. And then we've talked about Shifting. I mean, that card's, like, fine, but it's not been, like, incredible, I think, in its time in Standard so far. I think its ceiling is still very high. Like, it's got room to move. And I think Nightpack Ambusher seems very strong. My only problem with this is I'm unsure if this is, like, better than Mono Blue, and it's hurting our mana. And my fear is kind of the same we talked about with Feather, where it's like I don't want to be Naya because I feel like I don't need that kind of stuff, and I kind of feel that way about this. I don't know if I actually need, you know, all of this green cards in my blue flash deck. Maybe I do. Maybe I'm underestimating how important that pack ambusher is right now in Standard, but it doesn't feel that way. And that might be a thing where I'll play some games with the deck and then get a feel for the metagame and be like, oh, this is super important. But it doesn't read that on face value to me. And that's kind of where my problem comes.
So let me start by saying that I think if Teferi was not in Standard, you would not have the opinion that you have of Frilled Mystic.
Sure.
I have literally never resolved the Frilled Mystic and lost. Like,
sure, but I mean, like, that's not the world we live in, right? Like, I just get Teferied all the time before now.
Sure, but like, you know, when we've talked about the card, I don't know if you, like, we talked about it in Sultai, I don't know if you were on the show back then, we've talked about it in, like, every time that the card has been in a deck and it's done well, it's actually because of Frilled Mystic, in my opinion. Like, that is how, like, it is better Mystic Snake.
Yeah, but I think to Mason's point on this, though, that, like, it's hard for this deck to get under people in the same way that Mono Blue can, right? Like, this deck is, like, bigger and beefier and can do more stuff in a long game, but like it's not as aggressive to where you're just like, oh, I just got Curious Obsessioned out and I can never win the game. Like,
well, you know, even to that point, I would like to be more aggressive to leverage my Frilled Mystics more. I would like to, like, get on board, have the board matter, and make my opponent tap out for something that's important, and then me get them.
But if you have a Nightpack Ambusher in play, you're just one of the most aggressive decks in Standard, right? Because you are now the best tempo deck in the entire format.
Well, yeah, but you know, with the Mono Blue deck, you can be the best tempo deck in Standard by turn 2 and not turn 5.
So I am not bought into the Mono Blue hype for what it's worth.
All right.
I actually think the deck is still not something that you should be considering, and it could have been a really good choice this week, for example. But now that it's on people's radar again, like, it's gonna be tough. I think that the fact that the Elementals deck is a green deck that I think could easily adjust for that deck, with Shifting Ceratop, with Spry, with Crawl Harpooner if they wanted to, just means that the deck will not be able to exist as a tier 1 deck in this format.
Sure, that's totally possible, but it's hard.
Whereas I think, sorry.
So I was just gonna say that it's hard for me to, like, when we do these episodes, right? For me personally, it's kind of like I have to talk about what I know now. And I kind of led on too that, like, I thought that at least for this first week, Mono Blue was good, because it's hard for me to know, like, exactly what's going to shake up. I don't want to, like, I don't want to say something that, like, maybe is true, but I'm not 100% sure about it with listeners. So, like, I don't think Mono Blue is something that we'll see play down the road for the week and become unplayable. I would say this deck suffers from the same problem, though, if you say that. Yeah. Like, I think once this deck's on people's radar, it is much worse.
For sure.
This
deck certainly relies on counterspell being good on turns 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Or turns 2 and 3. Like,
what were you gonna say, Spencer? Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, like, I think that one of the things that Simic Flash has to me is, you know, cards that are in a vacuum good, whereas Mono Blue relies on its synergies to be a good tempo deck. Now, I don't know that I'm all about the 4 Sinister Sabotage in my tempo deck kind of player. That, to me, shows me a deck that either needs a lot more tuning or probably can't be here for the long haul.
Yeah. Agreed.
So I'm not even suggesting that, like, Simic Flash is here to stay while Mono Blue isn't here to stay. I'm just saying that, like, when I looked at the 2 decks and I looked at what I would want to be playing this week, like, when I was listening to the game podcast, I disagreed. I was like, I think that you are missing something here. I think that people will not be prepared to play against all flash threats, especially in a week where Teferi is likely to be down.
That is sorry, Trey.
Well, and it also is not surprising that you would like the more mid-range version of the decks.
Hey, hey, hey.
Just-
I was gonna mention that like there is some like when we're talking about these things we're both talking about like similar strategies just like slightly different approaches to it. I am unsure. Here's my hot take on Nightpack Ambusher. While that card is obviously very strong and very powerful, I am unsure if I want to build my deck around Nightpack Ambusher. I'd much rather build my deck around Filled Mystic. So I'm down to like retool the Simic Flash deck to be more aggressive and have access to Nightpack Ambusher, but I don't know if I want to be a Nightpack Ambusher deck. Like, does that make sense? And I feel like right now it is that. So,
what about the other deck on the list?
So,
well, don't you take us off this? We got more
Yeah.
Flash talk. I'm not
So,
done yet.
I do have one more thing. I want to retort. I want to retort Trey's point really quick. The highest my elo ever was with a white aggressive deck, and I promise I cast plenty of Delver Secrets in my life, and I also played Cobblade. So like I played Demo decks.
Sure,
I'm not
but you
saying
do
haven't.
love
I'm just
mid-range
talking
decks.
about what you like.
Yeah.
I've
Last
played
week-
plenty of decks
last
that
week
don't
on the
use
show you
graveyard, but
said-
we all know what I like.
Yeah. Last week I believe you said I really like mid-range decks because a couple times it's nothing wrong with loving mid-range decks, man.
Yeah.
I love the things I love.
Yeah.
I hate the things I hate. That's fine.
Yeah,
I
I d-
can't
but I don't.
choose.
But I think that there are words being put in my mouth here. I don't hate Mono Blue Tempo. I actually really like the deck. But yes, I agree. Let's talk about the next deck. This is I'm just going to talk about this because this is I want to specifically talk about the third place list. If you guys can pull that up, we have Chris Johnson's Team Elemental deck. I'm going to read it off for the listeners. We have 3 Cavalier of Thorns, 4 Creeping Trailblazer, 4 Leafkin Druid, 2 Living Twister, 2 Overgrowth Elemental, 4 Risen Reef, 4 Omnath, 4 Chandra Acolyte of Flame, 2 Chandra Awakened Inferno, 4 Lightning Strike, 3 Shock. We have 24 lands in this deck, with 2 Temple of Mystery being the only temple. And then we got kind of a pretty understandable sideboard with a couple of counterspells, Cinder Vines, Ether Gust, and Shifting Ceratops, as well as some additional removal. So here's the thing. Everyone has told me Creeping Trailblazer is unplayable, and I still have the highest win percentage with any deck that I've tested so far with Creeping Trailblazer Elementals. So I am probably going to play some kind of an Omnath Logos of the World deck at the Grand Prix. I want you guys to right now make the argument for me not to register Creeping Trailblazer.
Can I make the argument to not register Teamer Elementals, or do you want me to make the argument of not like? Are we like? Here's my question.
We're still talking about Team Elementals.
So so just for context, I have to like why not this card exactly? 'Cause
That is what I want to know. Is which of the versions do you guys like the best?
I'm kind of in the last week gotten off all of them. I think there's I think there just needs to be a lot of work. The things I don't like about Trailblazer that I'm trying to triple check here is what is the CMC on that card again?
It's
like
red-green.
Red green.
Okay, I thought it was red green 1. All right, sorry. That's why I was trying to check this. I don't know. Trey, do you want to talk about that card real quick?
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing that's strange, like, because this is for anyone who doesn't know, Creeping Trailblazer is red-green 2/2. It's other elementals get +1/+0, and then for red-green 2, Creeping Trailblazer gets +1/+1 until end of turn for all other elementals you control. Like, and the thing to me about this deck is that these decks are all value decks, and like having a Lord effect in this deck isn't really the way that this deck wins. And it seems weird to focus this on that when you could be focusing on just trying to maximize casting your spells ahead of curve.
Sure.
You could be casting your stuff, going wider, and then building your stuff up and going. Because Risen Reef and Omnath are going to grind people out.
Yeah.
And like trying to play these cards like Creeping Trailblazer and what is the other one that's in here? The Overgrowth Elemental. Like these kind of more aggressively slanted elemental cards, I think is fundamentally missing like what the strength of the deck is.
I don't know if I agree with that for what it's worth.
So
but continue.
it's funny because there are parts of this that I agree with and parts that are like pretty close on. So Risen Reef as a card is this value engine, right? And Cavalier of Thorns is not something that I have in my lists for what it's worth. If I have Creeping Trailblazer for what it's worth, all
Okay.
my other ones have it.
Gotcha. All right.
And I think that one of the things that we see in this list specifically is it's actually using Chandra Acolyte of Flame as its engine card, and because of that, and that card leans more aggressive, and it's substantially better with the Creeper Trailblazer in play, and that's why if you're going to have one, you kind of want the other, and it's really this really interesting dynamic where I can have aggressive draws while still outvaluing my opponent, which is what I found.
The part that's weird to me is that the person is not playing Lightning Stormkin, the flying haste elemental. When you have the Trailblazer, it seems like those two would be good friends. I don't know. This is all.
Yeah,
It's
and I've also liked the versions that have Nissa and Flood.
Yeah, that's the other version that I
Yeah. I mean, that's just more. I don't know. It's more interesting to me as to what it is that's going on.
Yeah, I think those decks
Like-
are unplayable now. I thought they were good last week, just for what
Yeah.
it's worth.
What do you think makes them unplayable?
The format is much more fast and it's adapted to them. The format is like aware of Risen is aware of that combo, and before it like wasn't, right? Like look at the decks that we talked about so far. So Boris Feather can it's kind of hard against that, but it can aggress the opponent if it needs to. Jund Dinos is aggressive to the opponent. The Simic Flash deck has Frilled Mystic, all these counter spells. You're not going to resolve your Flooded Tears. There's this deck which has Trailblazer, which is going to pressure the opponent while the opponent's trying to cast Flooded Tears. Spoilers coming up for the next 4 decks in some order are Vampires, Mono Red, Simic Nexus, and Esper Hero. 3 of those 4 decks are good against the card Flood of Tears. And Esper Hero is potentially good against the deck. So I just think that the whole metagame's aware of Flooded Tears, and when it's like that, you can't be registering 6-mana do-nothings. I've played that deck a bunch recently, and it's just not performed for me.
Did you look at the 9th place list, Mason?
The 9th, let me double check the 9th place list. I probably did, I do not remember it off the top of my head.
So it plays a single Mass Manipulation.
Love it.
And it plays a single Chandra Awakened Inferno, 3 Hydroid Krasis, and a couple Incubation Druids, and it's kind of just like instead of 3-color ramp being Bant, your teamer, because Omnath is better than every single card in the Bant deck.
Don't know about that, but I know it's really, really strong. I like this a lot. Now maybe the reason I like this is because it looks a lot like what I was doing originally. But when I was playing the deck, I had Mass Manipulation and Fight with Fire as my payoffs, because Fight with Fire doubles as a removal spell while being a win condition, which is something like the decks kind of lack. I personally think I like the Trailblazer more when thinking about it right now, only because the format is like aware of going this bigger route with elementals, and so having it be something that can allow you to be the beatdown in the mirror match seems like a good place to be, while also being a mana sink. Because the one thing we didn't really talk about is that other deck, doesn't have a lot of mana sinks, and your Trailblazer is a mana sink in that situation.
Yeah,
So
that's
I might
certainly true.
I might want to try and combine those personally. But I like this a lot. I would like probably... I don't really like the Nissa in the deck. Like, it's only really here for Mass Manipulation and Hydroid Krasis. I think I would personally rather have the other little Chandra to flash back some spells and have a few more spells. But I think Paul Muller, definitely had a game plan with this deck, and it was very strong. It was very close to being in the top 8 here. So,
yeah. I think that Simic, not Simic, Heimer is undoubtedly the direction that I'm leaning. I have not had the experience of Mason. I've won with every Elementals deck that I've played with. Almost all my losses on Arena lately are coming from when I'm testing non-teamer decks for my other podcast and when people recommend them to me. Like, I think I went all the way down. I went all the way back down trying to play Bant Ramp, which is a deck that you think that I would love and have a ton of success with. I think that there's the format is hostile to classic ramp decks, and these decks do it in a way. To Trey's point, if you want to build a ramp deck, you can do it in the teamer style. You get a ton of value out of your Omnaths and your Risen Reefs as these engine cards, in addition to playing things like Chandra, Hydroid Krasis, and things like that that really pay things off. So.
yeah, I agree with the statement that Bant Ramp is probably not good right now for the same reason with Flood of Tears, right? A lot of big payoff cards, and the format's hostile to that. I kind of like this Chris Johnson's Teamer Elemental deck the most of the decks I've seen. I'm a little suspect of Overgrown Elemental, but that might be a concession to Mono Red and stuff. I played with that card a good bit and was not as impressed, but I do love the 4 Chandra Acolyte of Flame. I think that card is very strong and underplayed.
Well, let's talk about the next deck, because we can get
The
off.
Nexus deck?
Oh, all right. So this deck had the most X and Dates with but did not convert to the top 8. So I'm gonna be honest. I still have never bought into Nexus being the best deck in the format, which some people claim. Like, I don't even know that there's been a point in which that was true.
Spencer, can you move your mic a little bit? Your sound sounds like you're a little far away from it. Sorry. Keep
Yeah.
talking. There you go.
Yeah, I just haven't bought into that, and I still just have a hard time believing it. I do like the addition of Nissa, which I think almost everybody has started to adopt as another card to play in their Nexus decks. But I don't know, where are you guys at with this deck, and where do you think that this sits in the format right now?
What's been really interesting to me about this deck is that, right after the core set launched, there were all of these evolutions of this deck with all kinds of new cards and all kinds of new stuff and all of these different directions and everything else. And then you look at this, like, Dylan Donegan 10th place finish, and, like, there's a Nissa in the main deck, and other than that, it's pretty much Nexus from the last format. There's a Nissa and a Narset, and none of those are particularly surprising, but there's not, like, all of these innovations, like playing Cavalier Thorns or playing, like, all of this other weird stuff that was going on of trying it out. And it's like, no, it was still just good before. It's just, we'll go back to the lists of the way that they were for the most part. And I think that's fascinating to me about the directions that these have ended up.
Yeah, I think, I talked about how I don't think big mana plays are particularly powerful right now, or well positioned, I should say. This is the one deck that has big mana plays, and I am, I think is a defendable choice. Someone posted, like, in a national group, like, what do you think about this deck right now? I just posted, it's a defendable choice. Like, I don't think it's particularly great. I wouldn't, like, blame you if you brought Simic Nexus to a tournament. It is, like, the one thing that goes over the top of other decks and does it quick enough, thanks to the card Wilderness Reclamation. I think that card allows you, because it jumps you ahead so far in mana since your deck plays at instant speed all the time. I do think the format is really hostile to it, and I do not think it is a deck that I would personally consider registering for the next couple weeks. I would wait until things change, but it's like fine, whatever.
Yeah, it's weird that, like, the reduction in the amount that Teferi 3 is being played is good for this deck, but then the counter to that is that it's just caused more counterspells to be played, which is bad for this deck.
Yeah, it's caused more counterspells. Also, the format's like pretty fast. I assume Vampires is fast enough to pressure this deck. I am not actually I'm not sure of that.
I would think that they are.
Yeah, it might have been also if they draw Sorin or not, which might be the story of Vampires, which we'll talk about later.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So I think that this is a deck that I was considering part of last week as a deck to play at GP Denver, and the reason that I'm off of it is that I think this deck has a fail rate much higher than people think it is. If you just play, 30 matches with the deck, you immediately see its very inherent weaknesses, and I don't think the deck has gotten. A lot of people said Ether Gust was like the answer to its weaknesses, and I just haven't found that to be true. It's just basically playing more Blink of an Eyes. Like, they almost do the exact same thing in most situations, and Blink of an Eye, while people played a lot more of them at the Mythic Championship, still just isn't enough for me to think that it puts this over the edge.
Yeah, I think it's like a metagame call deck. It's not like a generically powerful. Like, it is generically powerful, but like not like a deck you can just bring week in and week out. Like, you could have brought Esper Hero every week of last year format to every event you went to, and it almost never would have been a awful, oh my gosh, what in the world are you doing choice. Well, I do not think the same can be said of Nexus. So, partly because of the next deck too, if we're all done talking about Nexus.
Yeah, talk about that. I think that's a reasonable transition.
Mono Red is tied with Esper Hero here for the 2nd/3rd spot when it comes to points in the power rankings. And Mono Red is just proven to be a deck that is powerful and is a proactive game plan. And when people are trying to play that, when people are trying to go over the top of one another, Mono Red has a chance to shine. Even though I don't think Mono Red is particularly great right now, if people are doing this kind of stuff, I think Mono Red is a good choice, like contextually speaking, because it is proactive, kind of in the same way, proactive and efficient, kind of the same way that like Boris Feather or like Mono Blue is. Well, I might play those decks over this one. This deck I think is still really fast. Spencer, what do you think about Mono Red? Also, Mono Red won the Open with a very non-traditional take. I mean, it had 2 brand new cards in it, so it's obviously different than the old decks, but the deck's going different directions.
I do think the Ember Hauler is just pretty good, like as a card, especially in the context of Risen Reef being in the format and things like that. Just I mean, I've played a ton of Mono Red over the last couple months, and I don't know, Vecina Pyromancer just is not what it was in some of its early iterations of the deck. So I do like Ember Holler. Uh, I am not sold on Experimental Frenzy not being good.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either, but
While I appreciate Erin's list and what she was trying to do, I don't know that I agree with that take.
There were 4 in the 75, just only 1 in the main.
Yeah, if you listen to what she said on her podcast, Mason, your mic is going crazy. This deck, I think that Mono Red doing its thing is still just fine, and I don't know that Chandra Spitfire. I don't know. I didn't see what I wanted to see out of that card. I have somebody who's borrowing Mono Red from me for the GP, and I'll probably have a conversation about them like how do you want to play this list. I do trust Erin. I think that she's really smart. So, maybe I'm wrong, and somebody can convince me otherwise. But I would not play Erin's list specifically after playing just a couple games with it and kind of thinking about the format contextually.
yeah, I don't know if I would play Aaron's exact list. At an event, I would need to like it would be hard for me to play that in the dark. But like you said, Aaron is very good. I mean, like she won an invitational playing red decks. They always play aggressive decks, like that kind of style of deck, and they're very good at doing it. Um, so like, I might trust like them over that, but my gut says that that might not be the best thing going forward, and maybe there's something contextual with the format I just don't understand. It's just a choice that I am excited to hear more about, as I'm sure we will on this week's hardcast. So.
I do think the 20th place list was really interesting. One of the cards that I've been more impressed out of Mono Red than I thought it would be is actually Chandra Acolyte of Flame. So I would actually be interested in seeing if you can fit a couple of those into the main deck as kind of like a value engine that produces non-combat damage. And if you could do that, I might be more interested in Chandra Spitfire.
Sure. Yeah, just shock, flashback, shock.
Or non-combat damage. Yeah.
The one weird thing to me, and I guess Ember Holler works better with Chandra on that because you can sacrifice Ember Holler after you've played your Chandra and you're ready to attack. But Vishnu Pyromancer also works well at doing the damage to the face. But I guess, like you said, the one toughness matters a lot with just getting blocked by everything. So. Yeah. I would I would want to play this deck before I was thinking any changes, but I think the worst thing this deck says is look how good red is. Like the shell is like if decks aren't fighting on this axis and they aren't ready for us, we can take you regardless of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That's kind of been the story of red for the last 5 years.
What do people think about Leyline of Combustion out of the sideboard? I did not think that card would see any play, and seeing it in that 20th place list is really interesting to me.
I could believe it's good, especially with Chandra Acolyte of Flame, right? Like, was that the 3-mana one, right? Like you're making your shocks double up, so you're doubling up, right?
Wait, what? Is that what this card does?
Acolyte of Flame lets you flashback cards, right?
No. Well, Acolyte of Flame does, but
Wait.
Leyline of Combustion.
Leyline it shocks them if somebody targets your creatures or you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it did an additional 2 damage every time you did non-combat damage. I'm sorry. I don't know where.
That could be way better.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that cartoon's totally fine. Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know. Now that I know what the card does, put it in my feather deck. Bop 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 bop. Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know. Trey, what do you think?
It's weird. I mean, I could see it. Like, would you bring that in for the mirror? Like, if they're going to be shocking your stuff and killing your stuff, I mean, is that like mirror tech?
That's my question. Is it good against Esper? Was my first question. Which
Probably.
is it's probably fine against Esper. But is it better? What is it better than? So I would have to think about that. And then it was okay, is it good in the mirror? And it does actually seem quite reasonable in the mirror.
It does seem reasonable in the mirror.
But I don't know you would. Yeah, that's an interesting one to me that saw play. Red did get some good sideboard cards though, in Chandra and Fry. I think that the way that these decks can be built I think Aaron's list is proof that there is more to this deck than what it was, a month ago.
More than meets the eye on this Prime Day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
There's the real rest in peace.
Yeah.
Well, you know what we thought was going to have to rest in peace, or at least everybody was seeing its demise, was Esper Hero, and that deck is tied with this. So why don't we talk about some of the new cards in Toonbound Lich that seeing play, and this deck getting disfigured.
I mean, Disfigure's dope. Disfigure has always been good whenever it's been around. It's good now. You know, especially if mono red and vampires are going to see a lot of play like this, and it kills Risen Reef, it kills vampires, it kills all the red
Siren
creatures.
Stormtamer.
It does the work. It's efficient, it's effective, it's great.
Yeah, I've never played with this figure before, but it seems quite powerful. The card Toonbound Lich is a card that I was really excited for in Reanimator decks.
Is Tome Bound.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tomebound Lich. Tomebound Lich is one I was excited for in Reanimator decks, but in this context, I really like it because that deck did kind of have a tendency to flood out. So I'd be excited to try that deck with this, right? Now, between this, Elite Guard Mage, etc., having a little bit more lifelink in the deck too, because you have such a painful mana base, seems like a really powerful plan.
Also, having just additional powerful multicolored 3-drops is something that's good for this deck. Like being able to curve hero into this is effective, right? Like now you've got Oath of Kaya, you've got Teferi, you've got this. Like there's just a lot of stuff that you can curve hero into play and make a token.
Yep, for sure. Spencer, what do you think about the kind of changes to Esper Hero?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the changes make sense. I think, late last season it adopted Command the Dreadhorde, which I thought was a great get. It looks like because of the way the format's shaking up, it needs to play Enter the God Eternal again, which makes a ton of sense. So, the things that the deck is doing make sense to me on a fundamental level, which this deck has not always felt that way to me. I do think it's interesting that it's not playing Narset, which the Narset was the thing to be cut for all of these things. And Tomebound Lich is substantially less powerful than Narset.
Yeah, but I think it makes sense, especially if the other decks are more aggressive and those things are going on, to lean towards Lich in the main and to have Narsets on the side if you play against Simic or other things. Sure. Like the Narset being in the main was really a concession to the fact that you were playing a lot of Esper Mirrors or Esper Control decks.
Yeah.
And having that static effect was very powerful.
Yeah, and trying to find your Dreadhorde first, right? Like the matchup came down to a lot of who resolves Dreadhorde first. Narset was very good at stopping that. So
right, yeah. Narset's not particularly good against mono red or fairies, or not fairies, but vampires.
Also, if you're going to add more creatures to the deck, it kind of makes sense that you cut the card that doesn't work well with the creatures. So
yeah, I'm gonna say something that I've never said on this podcast, but I've thought every time I've played this deck, which is Teferi Hero of Dominaria is such a weird magic card to see play in a deck like this, but it's such a powerful magic card that fits into the colors that there's basically no reason not to play it, which is so funny.
Yeah, we should just ban the card.
What?
Teferi Hero Dominaria is a dumb card. It shouldn't exist. It's unfun to play against. I think it actively ruins games for me. It felt that way for a while now. I'll just open up on the podcast. It's also a cantrip.
Then you're talking about the wrong Teferi, man.
Oh, which one did I say? Little Teferi, Teferi 3, that one.
Oh, I was talking about the 5-mana one and how
Oh,
it's played in this deck.
I thought you were talking about the other one. Oh, dang. Why are there so many cards named Teferi? Slot Swansea. Whoa. Yeah.
No, it is interesting to me that, this deck plays the most powerful 5-mana cards, right? Getting to play Teferi Hero of Dominaria in your just straight-up value mid-range deck is really interesting because it is the most powerful card in the deck, and it sees play and has no synergy with the rest of the deck. You play so little of the game at instant speed in this deck, unless you have the other Teferi in play. It's very interesting, and I've always thought that, and I've just never expressed it on the show.
Yeah, I think it's a symptom of the deck flooding out a lot. You know what I mean? So you just need something that's powerful and can win you the game. But yeah, I don't know. The deck's clearly powerful. It might be a deck that I would consider if I wasn't allowed to play one of the decks I talked about earlier. Pretty high on my list. Sure. I wonder if it's too mid-rangey for everything, or if it's ability to answer everything out of the board with duresses and negates and Aether Gust and Stroke and blah 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 blah. Lets it be the mid-range deck of the format. But maybe this Team Elementals and their stuff is just too hostile, and it was just a holdover from last format. I'll be excited to see how that shakes up in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the best Teferi 3 deck that's around right now, and that against a lot of the decks that are on this list, Teferi 3 is very strong. And so, like, getting to play a deck that has this, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Should we talk about the last deck, which is pretty good against the Fairy 3?
Yep.
Can I just? All right. So I don't know. Do you want to get on your soapbox first? Do you want me to get on my soapbox first, Mason?
First off, we're talking about vampires.
All right. So Mason says
Orzhov vampires.
Mason says me. I don't believe that this deck is good. I think that this deck, this deck is so reliant on Sorin that it really is a turnoff to me. Like I think this deck's really bad, guys. Like I'm just to be honest. I've played this deck. I've played against it. I have not lost to this deck yet. I've played it against it with Elementals. I've played against it with Scapeshift. I've played against it with Mono Red. I actively don't think this deck is very good. And it coming in at number 1 was a dramatic shock to me. I do think that it has, powerful things that it does, and I'm not going to deny that. Knight of the Ebon Legion into Adonta Vanguard is very, very powerful. But and especially if you follow that up with a Sorin, you just probably have the best 1, 2, 3 in the entire format.
But your mana is really hard to make that happen.
Yeah, I am not a fan. Like I actively think this deck is not very good.
Yeah, so I played with that deck after Huey hit rank like 1 mythic or whatever, like a really high mythic rank. And I played the first game, I'm like, oh, my deck's so good. I like went blah 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 into Sorin, and then like I just ran over my opponent, and life's so great. This is so good. And the next game, yeah, Sorin is very strong. And then and there's some other things that like complement the deck as well, like Champion Desk. And then I like played against Mono White, and I was like, oh my gosh, why am I not registering like Venerated Loxodon? Why am I not registering History? Why am I not registering Benalish Marshall? To be fair, Benalish Marshall and the Vampire Lord are very similar, but I am kind of with Spencer, probably to a little bit lesser degree. I'm very surprised it was high up as it was. I expected it to kind of be where Feather was, and I kind of expected things to all be kind of shift up one spot from that kind of point from there on.
Yeah,
I
think you're right. I think I would have expected it in the 7-8 range because people have been wanting to play this deck for so long. I just expected a lot of people to play it.
Yeah, and then I and it's a proactive deck and like has powerful cards, so like you expect it to like do pretty well. I am really interested in why so many people picked it. I'm really interested in why so many people put down their other like really strong white cards. I would love to talk to them. I'd love to like sit down and talk to Zachary Keeney and ask like why he decided to play this deck and why he did what he did. I am not convinced at the moment that Sorin is better than History or Sorin is better than Venerated Loxodon.
Well, I don't know that I agree with that. I think Sorin is one of the best cards in Standard.
But Sorin makes me put all these vampires in my deck. Well, the other cards make me put all these like aggressive, like good cards in my deck.
Sure, but if you just replaced every card in Standard creature type with vampire, Sorin would be the best card in Standard.
Well, sure, that sounds like a magical land.
Sure.
I'm just saying that like if you look at the card on power level, the card is certainly very strong.
Yeah, but I think to Mason's point, anytime I've seen this deck, I haven't seen like outside of Sorin, what's the incentive to be playing this versus playing the mono white deck?
Yeah.
And that while the Sorin is a big draw to playing vampires, you lose out on all of the other generically powerful and consistent things that you can do in mono white. Right? Like, because this deck has incredible curve out things that it can do, but your mana has to line up in the right way, the cards have to line up in the right way, as opposed to like the mono white deck has consistent things that it does to curve out every time, all the time.
Yeah. Also, like when you draw multiples of your power card, like multiple History of Analysis is unbeatable. Multiple Sorins is potentially a weakness, right?
Yeah.
So that is something. And then I talked about it a couple times this episode, and I still think it's true. Like I'm not sure if I want to give up my honestly, either maybe just straight white mana base or adding those temples to the deck, which sometimes like I think you kind of have to play to make your curve outs work, and that makes you just not curve out on one as much. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe I'm just playing the format wrong right now, but I'm not sure if I want to give up that kind of mana for having Sorin in my deck and some of these other vampires. I also am curious if maybe we should be playing more of the token making vampire cards. I don't know if this is like the most optimal vampire deck in the world. I certainly hope it's not, but I'm not. I think it's a defendable deck. Probably not one that like I might give you a little a little rubbing if you were to play that in your Aston, and be like, you can play history. So that's kind of where I'm
Yeah.
at with it.
I'm legitimately surprised. And I can only go off of my experience in testing for this Grand Prix. I think that the game podcast talked about this really well, where they said that you're because you're a proactive deck, you're going to win a percentage of your matches just from being that. But the problem that I find with this deck is it doesn't have the stuff to make up the rest of the percentages that you need to be a great deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they said it was like the 45% deck of this format. And I don't know if that's where I want to be with my aggro deck.
And that's always a hard deck too. Is like if you're the 45% deck, like you're gonna win a lot of games, and it's gonna make it hard for you to get off of it if you're having a good time with those things. Like that's close enough to being good enough that it can be deceptive that you're not having the results that you really wanted.
I will say this: if you were to force me to not play an established deck, right, and you had to play something new for the SCG, vampires might be a place I could see how people got there, right? No one's obviously forcing these people; they could have easily done that. But if you're okay, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole of testing, kind of like Trey talks, right? You win a good number of your games, and kind of like we talked about earlier, if you go Knight of the Ebon Legion, Adanto's Vanguard, a Sorin, put in something powerful, or Sorin take up on my Adantos, that's an unbeatable curve. You do that enough, and it's well, I'm not actually sure if this is good enough, but I know that draw is good enough. I know other people are going to have a clunky deck, so I'm going to draw like that. And London Mulligan helps you do that, so.
Sure.
Yeah. Kind of where I'm at on it. Sorin's pretty cool. Can't wait to see that card next format. What if that card is insane next format? What if there were just enough vampires and where everyone's making the same joke?
There's some theories that we're going back to Ixalan in 2 sets, for what it's worth.
Going back to Ixalan?
Yeah.
I think we're going to go back to Theros soon. I think we're going to go to a snow plane. Not like a snow plane, but a plane with Vikings and stuff. You can't see if you're not watching the podcast, but I've got Viking axes in my hand according to my movements. Yar, matey.
You can find Mason and his Viking axes on Twitter at the Mason Clark or Mason
At
Clark.
Mason E. Clark.
I wouldn't forget yours though, Trey. It's Trey MC on Twitter. You can find me at Spencer13H. You can find the podcast at CCMTG. You can find the rest of the network over at constructorcriticism.com. Check out the other things going on. Common Knowledge is popping. I've got a new podcast in ArenaCast. We've had Yeoman 5 was our last guest. We've had Smitty. The podcast has been very fun, and I hope that people are getting something out of it.
I think you might have said the wrong name for your podcast. What's the podcast? You said the Arena podcast.
I said Arena Mythicast, right?
No, I think I misheard you. I thought you said Arena Deckless Cast. I thought you said Jerry's podcast, but it's fine. I probably just misheard you. Keep going. Keep going.
Well, if I did edit it out.
Act cool. Act cool. Everyone act cool. Nothing happened.
Yeah, and then if you want to check out and support the show, you're going to a Grand Prix coming up. You can go to the swag store over on constructorism.com. Just click on swag and you buy a shirt. It kicks us a little bit, and it can let you rep the show in a way that's not Patreon, which you can also support us at. But let's go on to our newest segment. Mason, why don't you introduce it?
So we got some feedback from our patrons. Ellison B, as you might remember from a couple weeks ago on the patron thing, we were asking what would you add as a new segment to the show? And Ellison suggested, and some other people backed Ellison up with the end of the show being a what you would play segment. So instead of doing a hashtag would that be good, I'm going to be the bad guy like Billie Eilish talks about. We're killing the segment. It's gone. We're going to talk about what we would play each week in Modern and Standard. Sometimes we're going to have to sell each other on the deck. Sometimes we're just going to say it. We're going to experiment, see what you like. Give us feedback at CCMTG or DM Spencer, Trey, or I.
Oh, I thought you were just going to say me, and I was like, what the heck?
Yeah, just actually only DM Trey.
There we go.
Yeah, slide into his DMs.
Don't do that.
Speaking of slide to your DMs, Trey, slide me them deck lists. That's what I mean, right? Deck list messenger?
Yeah, that's all it's for. That's all Twitter is about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all Magic Twitter does is talk about deck lists and
unreasonable
improving.
beefs.
On Magic Twitter? I would never.
If I had a tournament this weekend, I would play Esper Hero. I think that there have been so many things that have popped up due to the decline of Teferi 3. I think people are sleeping on the Teferi Reflector Mage, and I think that will be to their detriment. I mean, you just can't play things nonsense like Simic Flash and other stuff like that if that card's around. and I think that it has the tools to combat all of the rest of the stuff that's happening, and that it really creates a lot of problems for Nexus, Mono Blue, Simic Flash, these other decks that are popping up. And being the Teferi 3 deck when people are sleeping on it, I think there's a lot of value to be had there. But you can find me on Arena smashing Blue-Black Reanimator because I'm stubborn and I think it's fun.
What would you play in Modern, Trey?
I would probably play Dredge. In what context that will be yet, I'm not entirely sure. I'm messing around with Hogak still and trying to see what it is that it's, if that's still workable. I think that it is. But I think that I would play Dredge this weekend.
Dope. I'd like to hear that. That's pretty cool. Spencer, you've got a Grand Prix coming up. What would you play?
Yeah, I'm narrowing down right now. There's a very, very, very high chance that Omnath is in my deck, and if it's not, Teferi will be. So, and I don't mean that in the form of Bant Ramp. I mean that in the form of Esper Hero. My problem with Esper Hero, for what it's worth, is that I was playing Teamer Flood last week, and my first 6 matches were all against Hero, and I won all of them 2-0, and they weren't close.
Yeah, I think Flood beats the crap out of Teamer.
Like it was
Esper, yeah.
It was embarrassing. Like it was one of the best matchups I've ever played. And like the crazy thing to me is that my opponent would cast Thought Erasure, and I was like, oh man, this hand's gonna be so bad. But all of the cards in your deck are so value driven that it actually makes Thought Erasure look bad, even though it tears apart your hand. And you think that would be good in this deck that has so many synergies. It wasn't. It was just like, well, all right, whatever. Like, here's my other value driven thing, which was just kind of an interesting place to be in. So I think that my decision will specifically depend on how good I think Teferi is positioned versus how good I think Teamer is positioned. And it will just come down to that. I'm leaning Teamer right now for quite a few reasons. I think that Chandras are underplayed. I think all 3, the uncommon 4-mana one, the 3-mana rare one, and the 6-mana mythic one, are actually just all very good cards. And I plan on playing at least 2 of them in any deck that I play if I play Teamer. And I can almost guarantee that one of those 2 will be the 4-mana one. And that will be true even if I play a Flood or Ramp version of the deck. So.
Awesome. What would you play in Modern?
Yeah, so I would play Snow, Bacon, Tomato, Lettuce, Scapeshift.
What is that for people who aren't on the nonsense?
Yeah, so the Bring to Light Scapeshift is now playing the Baleful Strix for Snowlands, and the deck just looks hot. And I have played 0 games with it, but I've looked at like a lot of deck lists, and that's what I would just register if I had a Modern tournament tomorrow.
Awesome.
Yeah, it looks hot.
It looks like a lot of fun. I'm unsure how it wins at times, but I keep seeing people post 5-0s, and I'm just like, well, dang, if you told me I just get to play this deck in 5-0 a bunch, I'm in.
That's the weird thing is, like, I think I've seen a couple 5-0s, and it's...
Ojutai's command.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So here's the thing about Bring to Light Scapeshift. So I have never been that high on the Bring to Light version. I've always said if I wanted to play that version, why wouldn't I just play Teamer? Because I get better mana, I get Jace the Mind Sculptor. Like the deck just is very, very consistent in Teamer. You fit very well into your control game plan. And then the Bring to Light versions became kind of these like weird control combo decks that are like straight up combo decks that are control decks. More similar to something like Twin than to something like Titan Shift. So I don't know. That is the deck that I would be trying. If I didn't play that, I would be playing something with Mardu Pyromancer, likely Jund.
So this is what I'll say about your Bacon Lettuce Tomato Scapeshift deck. I think there was a interaction on Twitter that perfectly wrapped up my opinions on this deck. I believe it was Emma Handy tweeted at someone who posted a 5-0 saying, hey, I'm just kind of curious what's the appeal of playing this deck right now. And then Jessica Estefan replied with, I was talking to them and they said something, Ojutai's command, something. And which made me just think, okay, I don't think anyone really knows what's going on. The deck's just like winning, and it's sweet, and so people are playing it, and we're winning with it.
Yeah.
It's super sweet though. Like it looks like a great time. Oh, I didn't have an SCG coming up. I would definitely play leagues with it. Looks like a lot of fun.
It has 3 5-0s for what it's worth, and they're by 3 different people. I don't know. I probably wouldn't play this deck. If I'm being honest, I would probably end up playing Jund.
Yeah, running $60 is the buy list price.
So the thing that's really appealing to me about Jund in Modern right now is, first of all, I think it's the deck that Seasoned Pyromancer has ended up being the best in, and also it gets to play the most powerful card in Modern and Ren in 6. So
Rest in peace, Michael Henderocker.
so, but like legitimately, I don't know. It got quite a bit out of the new set. What do you guys actually think of Hex Drinker?
Hex Drinker is the 2/1 level up creature for those at home that you can spend mana to make it a 4/4 at level 3, I believe. And then it has protection from instants, and you spend 5 more mana, it becomes level 8, and at that point it has protection from everything. It's okay. I've played against it a couple times. The weird part about it is I like that it prevents you from like having flooding out and not being able to like do anything with your mana except activate like Raging Ravine or whatever that card's called. That's like nice, but I'm not super sold on it yet, but I'm willing to believe it's right. Does that make sense? Like I need to play some more with it.
Yeah, I don't know if we said this during the. I think we might have said this during the set review that it reminded me of the Jund decks right after Bloodbraid Elf got banned, that played the aggressive slanted ones. So it's interesting. This deck has a lot of mana sinks. If you look at Seasoned Pyromancer, if you look at Hex Drinker, if you look at Scavenging Ooze, there's just a lot going on there.
Yep, there's a lot going on. So for myself, if I was playing a standard tournament, I'd probably end up playing Boros Feather or Mono Blue. If the week went on and a lot of people were talking like we were, and everyone's like, y'all sleeping on Little Teferi, I'd probably switch to Esper Hero, and I'd probably play like a Dread Horde in my deck. Maybe not in the main, but somewhere in the 75, and I might put some Narcissist back in the main, kind of switch around stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm at for standard. And for modern, as of right now, since I hate cantripping, I'm trying everything in my power to not play Is It Phoenix. That's not even a joke. I'm not memeing. That's literally how we got here. Is It Phoenix is clearly incredibly powerful. The deck's very strong. It's very consistent. Always plays Magic. But I am so bored playing Phoenix all the time that I literally zone out at moments. And as such, I am looking to play Humans or Dredge, most likely Humans, at SCG Columbus here in 2 weeks. So I've been reading up a bunch on that.
I feel like E-Tron's matchups have not gotten worse. And while I had years on this podcast saying that deck was unplayable, I still think it's really well positioned right now.
I think it's totally reasonable to play. I am unsure if I want to go register E-Tron right now in the metagame. I think it is pretty good. But I think it's a totally valid choice. I think big mana decks are going to come back now, and that's a problem for E-Tron historically, and they were just gone, and one of its best matchups is gone now with Hogak, so.
We just talked about some bacon that could really fry that deck, so.
Yeah, that deck can't beat Ojutai's command on the Baleful Strix, right? Like, flash my Baleful Strix in, block your Thought-Knot Seer, draw 1,000 cards, cast your Reality Smasher, nice deck, idiot, buy back my thing, draw a card, gain 4 life, so, yeah, you know.
Did we really just talk about something not being able to beat Ojutai's command? Like, in a sincere way?
Yeah.
And that is it for this week's episode of Constructive Criticism. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening, and we'll talk to everybody next week.